When you look at the entirety of our culinary history, there are thousands, if not millions, of dishes that have been developed all around the world. There's no way that anyone could ever sample them all, and there's no way that anyone would ever like them all either. And maybe that's part of the beauty of cooking and eating. Your tastes are your own, and you're free to enjoy what you like and ignore what you don't. Still, sometimes the government has to step in and decide that no one is allowed to eat a certain food for one reason or another. Number 10. Haggis. When you think of world cuisine, there are a few dishes that are emblematic of the countries they come from. Poutine and maple syrup are distinctly Canadian. Sushi absolutely brings to mind Japan. And when you think of Scottish food, you're probably thinking of haggis. Traditional haggis is made from the offal of a sheep. That includes internal organs such as the heart, liver, and lungs. That meat is mixed with filler ingredients that give it some body and flavor. Things like oatmeal, onion, suet, and spices. It's all mashed up together, kind of like a meatball or a sausage, and then traditionally it's wrapped in the animal's stomach and then cooked. These days, there are dozens, if not hundreds, of different ways to prepare haggis. Like any food, recipes have evolved and chefs have come up with unique and modern ways to prepare the dish. You can find haggis served in restaurants that's made not just from sheep, but beef, venison, rabbit, and rare game meats. It's the traditional haggis that got banned in America, however. In particular, the USDA has banned the sale of sheep lung. According to their standards, this ingredient is not edible and therefore cannot be included. For that reason, if you want to make it in America, you have to leave that ingredient out. So if you're a fan of traditional haggis, you're out of luck in the US unless you're willing to make the compromise to swap out that key ingredient. Number 9. Horse meat. Few foods are as controversial even to this day as horse meat. To some, it's no different than slaughtering a cow or a pig, which is a common and everyday thing in America. For others, a horse is much more like a dog or a cat. These are animals that people bond with and consider closer to pets than livestock. Because of the taboo against eating horse meat, it's banned in many states across the United States, though not all of them. The history of the slaughter of horses in the United States dates back a number of years, but it was traditionally an export business. The horses would be killed and the meat would be sent abroad. Both Canada and Mexico allow for the slaughter of horses for meat. Number 8. Beluga Caviar. Beluga caviar, which comes from beluga sturgeon, is one of the most expensive foods in the world. 1 kilogram of these fish eggs will set you back about $35,000. That's around 50% of the value of the same weight in solid gold. Part of the reason for the incredible cost of beluga caviar is just how rare it is. The fish that it is harvested from are native to the Caspian Sea, and they are seriously endangered. In the last century, the populations declined by about 70%. Much of this is thanks to illegal poaching and overfishing. Because the fish are so critically endangered, the caviar was banned in America in the year 2005 in an effort to curb the demand and keep the species alive. Today, if you want to have beluga caviar in America, there's only one legal source of it, thanks to a business person who invested in some of the fish back in 2003 and had them imported to the country before the ban took effect. Number 7. Ackee. The national fruit of Jamaica, ackee is an extremely popular fruit on the island, and it's well represented through Jamaican and island cuisine. Ackee and saltfish is something that you can find at pretty much any Jamaican restaurant. The fruit itself is a bit unusual and has a kind of savory, creamy quality to it, and it's also been banned in the United States. The reason for the ackee ban is that if the fruit is not properly prepared, it's actually toxic. It contains something called toxin hyperglycin A, which can dangerously lower blood sugar levels. It also causes vomiting, drowsiness, and even potentially death. So the prepared product is usually safe, but fresh, it can be potentially dangerous. Further, the seeds of the fruit can also be dangerous. Number 6. Kinder Surprise eggs. Around the world, kids love Kinder Surprise eggs. The chocolate shell houses a tiny plastic egg inside in which you can find a toy of some kind. If you've ever had one, you know that more often than not, the toy is a pretty cheap little trinket that certainly won't change your life, but the surprise is more of the fun behind this idea than anything else. Even though Kinder eggs are enjoyed by children all throughout Europe, Asia, and Canada, the United States has taken a stand against them because that tiny toy inside might have even tinier parts that's a danger to children, at least as far as the US government is concerned. The ban on Kinder eggs dates all the way back to 1938, when government policy deemed it unacceptable for any food product to have non-nutritive ingredients. Kinder eggs hadn't been invented at that time, but when they did show up in the 1970s, they met the requirements for this ban, and so they were never allowed in the country. Number 5. Fugu. By now, almost everyone has heard of the Japanese delicacy known as fugu. This preparation of pufferfish has even been parodied on The Simpsons in an episode all the way back in 1991. The reason it became infamous is because, well, if it's prepared incorrectly, it can kill you. The fugu fish isn't technically toxic on its own. Its diet is what makes it so dangerous. The pufferfish eats snails and other toxic little creatures of the deep, and those toxins are filtered by the fish's liver. The liver is incredibly toxic, and if when preparing it as food, it suffers even even the slightest cut, that toxin will filter through the entire fish. Just one pufferfish liver is thought to contain enough poison to kill 30 adult humans. Additionally, the rest of the fish's organs will have traces of the toxin as well. After ingesting the toxin, you'll have anywhere from half an hour to 4 hours in which to experience respiratory failure before ultimately succumbing to death. There isn't a treatment for the tetrodotoxin in the liver, so it's best avoided. Despite that, humans have apparently been eating these fish for well over 4,000 years. Japanese chefs who want to become Fugu masters have to train for at least 3 years to master the art. In America, it was simply decided to ban the fish to prevent any potential problems, as there are still a handful of people who die from Fugu poisoning every year. Number 4. Absinthe. Also known as the Green Fairy, absinthe is the liquor of choice for literary types and those who fancy themselves just a little bit goth. Both incredibly strong and incredibly bitter, the alcohol has a reputation because of its association with famous literary giants like Ernest Hemingway and Oscar Wilde. Ask someone today why absinthe was so popular, and you might hear of a chemical called thujone. The product of distilling the wormwood that absinthe is made from, it was believed that thujone had psychoactive properties, which is what made it so appealing for artistic types. It would expand their minds and allow them to go on a bit of a trip and become more creative. It's for that reason that absinthe was actually banned in the US. It's only been in the last few years that absinthe has been allowed to be sold again, and the amount of thujone must meet federal regulations. The ironic thing is that studies have shown that old absinthe doesn't have any more thujone than modern absinthe does. There's actually nothing at all in absinthe that has psychoactive properties. That includes modern absinthe or old bottles that have been studied as well. So, where did this reputation come from? Some of it was likely just propaganda. Some of it was probably chronic alcoholism related to the fact that absinthe was about 140 proof, and the rest was likely due to faulty distillation causing contaminated batches. Number 3. Foie gras. Foie gras is the liver of a duck or goose that has grown to an obscenely large size because the bird has been force-fed in captivity. They actually get up to about 8 times their natural size, which makes it a gourmet delicacy to some, but is also, in very technical terms, an example of a horribly diseased liver. And it's for that reason that foie gras has been under assault for many years because of the cruel nature of the way it's prepared. Although in places like Europe it has now been considered a delicacy for years, bans have been taking effect across America, including a most recent ban in 2019 in New York State. California passed a ban in the year 2004 that took 8 years to fully come into effect. But there's a lot of money in the industry, so there have been legal challenges that have so far been unsuccessful. As more bans take effect, it seems likely that a nationwide ban could be in the near future. Number 2. Autoland. The Autoland bunting bird is about 6 inches high and can be found throughout Europe and parts of Western Asia. Although their population is stable in most countries, it has dipped remarkably low in France. The French delicacy of Autoland caused the population to dip so low that the animals were listed as a protected species, and hunting of Autoland was banned in France in 1999. Despite the ban, the law was never very strictly enforced. The fact that people eat Autoland is not what is grisly about their fate. We eat all kinds of birds. It is the way in which Autoland is prepared that has caused countries like the US to ban serving them as food. According to the traditional recipe, the little bird is supposed to be blinded. Without the benefit of its vision, it will eat constantly and gorge on whatever seeds or fruits are provided. Then, much the way foie gras is created, the little birds become exceedingly fat as a result of their overeating. Once they've reached an appropriate size, the bird is then immersed in Armagnac brandy to drown and then marinate the animal. At this point, they're roasted, and then once they're cooked, the idea is to eat them whole, feet first. Even though it's banned in France, it's believed about 30,000 a year are still captured and sold illegally for around $180 per bird. French chefs are still in love with the idea, and there are many off-putting descriptions of eating the bird which describe the transcendent moment its tiny ribcage breaks in your mouth. Part of the ritual for eating the bird involves having the napkin you're using for dinner placed over your head to hide your face. This has 2 reasons. One is to allow the napkin to capture the aroma of the bird before you eat it. The other is supposedly to hide the sin of what you're doing from God. Number 1. Sea turtle. There was once a time when sea turtle was considered something of a special occasion food. People ate it the way you might eat turkey today. Not an everyday sort of thing, but a special dish. Abraham Lincoln had turtle served at his second inauguration. Turtle soup was a favorite across the country for many years. Campbell Soup used to sell mock turtle soup by the can, made from calf's head rather than turtle, because turtle was becoming harder and harder to come by. And that is the crux of why eating turtles has been banned. They were eaten to the point of critical endangerment. These days, things like green sea turtles are federally protected as endangered species. It's a felony charge to kill and eat these creatures now, so you won't find them on menus any longer.